The journey is conversations with ordinary people about stories of transformation and how we may have had setbacks in our life and how we persevered through those, how we've learned from those obstacles, and how they've maybe helped us on our path today. Well, welcome to the journey, John. John Penney's joining us today. And let me tell you a little bit about what the journey is about. The journey is essentially having just ordinary individuals come on and tell their story about either setbacks that they've had in their life or maybe how they've transformed their lives from an athlete to a business person, from someone who's maybe struggled with some type of personal ailment or an injury or an accident, or how they plan on trying to change or transform a business or some type of concept. So how to fail forward when we have setbacks in our life.
Great.
So welcome, John, and just wanted maybe before we get started, if you could just maybe share a little bit about who you are and what do you do for fun if you're not busy working with other people.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me. Well, in a nutshell, I have been in construction about 21 years.
Okay.
Graduated from Auburn High School.
Okay.
I've got 2 kids, and I would say for fun, I have an extreme hobby, and I call it extreme because it has really kind of consumed and kind of defined who myself and even my wife have become, and it's been a lot of fun, and it's turned into a major passion. So basketball was introduced into our family, I think, when my daughter was about 4th grade.
Okay.
She just graduated college now, as a matter of fact, so if that gives you a little idea, it was quite some time ago. And from that moment, I became a basketball coach.
Okay.
Didn't really know what I was doing at the time.
Sure.
And then basketball, after a year or 2, began to get a little bit more serious for my daughter. And then I started to learn about travel basketball and AAU basketball and what went into that. And essentially started my own AAU travel basketball program called the Rockford Heat.
Okay.
And now the rest is history. There's been a lot of hours of reading books and learning about basketball. I played basketball when I was younger, but never formally at Auburn. So it was a lot of street ball, a lot of at the parks when they still played at the parks. Great days. Wish we could bring some of those back. And so with the time invested through YouTube and reading books, watching other coaches in the area, really trying to hone in on what it means to be a basketball coach. Fast forward to today, and Rockford Heat has 16 to 20 teams in the summer. Rockford Heat is a focal point for helping young ladies get to college now through the sport and obtain athletic scholarships, academic scholarships, and so on, to be able to kind of pursue their future of getting a degree and become that college athlete.
Sure. Okay. Well, I know we have a lot to talk about. I have a lot of questions about that organization and what that is all about. But now, were you involved with athletics growing up? I know you played street ball and stuff like that. But were you involved with organized sports growing up, or not so much?
Well, organized sports, it's really difficult, and it's still difficult today. I didn't necessarily grow up with the means to be involved in organized sports, and so that kind of was a major barrier for me to be able to, I guess, step into that arena, and that's why I fell to the next best thing, which in my days was playing at the parks or playing at the Y. I had a lot of great memories of being involved in that as a kid. And then at Auburn, the only scholastic, I would say, group that I was part of was the chess team. I ended up picking chess up as a freshman. Whole different story behind that, and I had a teacher that really took me under his wing, taught me the game, started reading books on chess, which a lot of people to this day still don't know about me, and I believe 2 out of the 4 years we won state at Auburn.
In chess?
In chess.
Okay, all right.
I was the only kid on the team not in the gifted program at Auburn. If you're familiar with that, the gifted program is housed at Auburn High School.
Yep.
And for my board, I went undefeated all 4 years at the state tournament as well. So chess was something that was very close to me. Even now, I still love the game. I don't get to play it as much, but that was the only group or club that I was actually involved in.
So obviously having someone who's going to mentor you and show you those certain techniques and just believe in you, right? Just believe in the process.
That was big. Yeah, it was huge.
I mean, that's so critical for that to happen. But there has to be something naturally within you that you gravitated toward that particular activity, that particular sport. What was it about chess that kind of seemed to draw you in, or maybe even that, along with what, like at an early age, young when you first got into it, what made you? How'd you stand out versus the other players?
Chess. To me, chess is a competition within yourself.
Okay.
You're constantly struggling with what the right next move is.
Yeah.
And so when you have those types of struggles and you're breaking down what that next move is, that means you've gone through 10 other moves to see if that is the best next move, and you've broken it down. You've really taken a look at the pros, the cons of that piece or that potential move before you rest on what piece you actually move. So to me, it's always been a personal, I would say just a personal, I'm not quite sure what the right word is, but it would fall into battle, struggle, somewhere along those lines.
Sure.
On which one you're actually going to move. And so I really took it seriously because I knew that a lot of things I was dealing with on a personal level, you could find right on that chessboard.
Okay.
And so to this day, being in construction for so long, construction is like chess. You have to have things fall into place, and you have to make sure that those steps are followed to finish a building. And it's the way my mind works, and I'm not quite sure why.
Okay. Well, but there must be a part of, we talk about it with artists, we talk about it with individuals that are certain types of athletes. They have, their football IQ, and some of it has to do with understanding the game. Some of it has to do with being exposed to it numerous times. But then there's another element that they see things unfolding differently than the person whose football IQ isn't as developed. And I think there must be some element of that when you're describing chess, because I think of it with art, I think of it with different sports, but this particular activity of chess, it's all strategy, right?
It's all strategy.
And it's not only understanding the game, but it's having the discipline and the willingness to lay out those moves in your mind before you make them, and then it's, again, strategy. It's a gamble of which one is going to work, but then at least you know what your game plan is.
Yeah, and I think about that a lot, especially as I'm starting to get older, and I really do self-diagnosis on things that I've done throughout the day, things that I've done throughout the month, things that I've done throughout the year, and try to make sure that my next steps moving forward are either going to be better, maybe they're going to be the same in some situations, but you really get to pull off of your experiences in the past to make those decisions moving forward. So, that's a little bit of, I guess, an advantage you have in the future, and that's what perspective is. But in that moment of learning the actual game of chess, I just, for one, I was always ultra competitive.
Sure, okay.
So I didn't like losing to begin with. And with the game of chess, it really does come down to knowing the strategies, knowing what the end goal is, right? The end goal is to get checkmate, and how do we get to that point? And so with there being so many pieces on the board, just like the game of life, you really got to take a look at all those options before you move your next step forward.
Okay.
And so I that's just the way I look at it.
Sure.
It may be different for some people. It may be a little bit more strategical. But for me, I really took the understanding of knowing the importance of each piece on the board.
Sure. It's so I can go in a couple different directions with that, just as we're talking about building a team, but one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about is that this idea of making, when we make a mistake, when we don't win, we may lose a move or lose the game, but it doesn't necessarily equate to being a loser. That each time there's opportunity to learn from it, and sometimes the bigger the setback, the greater the opportunity is for something to learn about ourselves, right? And so if you were thinking back on your chess and how that's been and how instrumental it was at a certain time period in your life, but then foundationally it probably has a lot to do with what you do business-wise and then the different organizations you're involved with. What would you say a lesson that you may have learned, maybe from a setback, maybe not, when you were playing chess?
Well, it's interesting you bring it up that way, because in chess, sometimes you have to sacrifice a pawn to gain a knight or a rook or a bishop. Sometimes you sacrifice a couple pawns to gain a knight, a rook, or a bishop, or sometimes a queen. And so the strategy that's laid out and understanding that potential setback or that potential loss of that piece or loss of the goal maybe that you were shooting for, to be able to learn from it and then move forward from it is again, that's how we gain our perspective. And it's been a huge value to me, especially, I'm born and raised on the west side of Rockford, so I can translate it and get a little personal there and tell you, there was a lot of strife in my personal family growing up. But how did that help for me moving forward? Well, there are some things I definitely didn't want in my immediate family growing up. There are some things that I definitely wanted my kids to have that, I didn't have those opportunities. And now where I'm at, there's a whole lot of kids that I see an opportunity to help them, and I've been able to give them that help through the game of basketball, as opposed to not sitting back and just saying, well, we did this or we did that, and that was good enough. But the goals have constantly been pushed forward in a strategic way to make sure that, if we had that setback or if I suffered that setback, maybe I can help somebody else that's in that same setback move forward. Sure.
Okay, perfect. So tell us how you graduated from high school, and you went to work right away? You went to college right away? What did you end up doing?
Yeah, so I actually went to a trade school for about 6 months, and it was out in the suburbs, and I moved back and got a job at Amrock, the historic name of Rockford, and was working at Amrock in a factory, and I couldn't move. I was stuck in one place, and I tell everybody all the time, the best thing that came out of Amrock was meeting my wife, and so I was able to meet her there, and from that moment on, we both left Amrock before it had closed. We didn't know it was going to close at the time, but we had both left. She went into accounting, and I went into construction. And so from there, I joined the apprenticeship program for the Painters Union. And started going to school for that, started working, and really drawing off of the elders that I was able to go to work with every day and learn from their life experiences, learn from their construction experiences, learn the techniques, and essentially learn the trade. And I put, everything I had into that at that moment of learning the trade. We had a young daughter at the time, so, the family had started at that moment. And we had kind of, me and my wife and daughter, we kind of pulled together and said, all right, let's keep pushing forward. And we kept learning as we were moving forward through that.
Okay. Now, so what is your wife's name?
Esmeralda.
Esmeralda.
Yep.
Now, when she went into accounting, was that just going into the field of accounting, or did she go back and get formal education in that process, especially with a young family at the time? So how did you guys do that?
That's a good question. So once we got together and we had our daughter, we knew that Amrock wasn't where we wanted to be. And so at that moment, she went back to college.
Okay.
So that made it even more strenuous because she went full time.
Okay.
And so we had made that decision, which isn't an easy decision to make at the time when you're young. It's more of a financial decision than anything, and you're saying, okay, let's put our faith in God and put our faith in this family and say, okay, let's do it. So she went back to college, and about the same time, I had joined the apprenticeship program, and so a lot of different things were coming at us that were brand new. I'd never been in construction or a painter before. I'd actually helped my grandfather out in the summers doing carpentry and stuff like that, but I'd never been a painter, and then my wife had not been in college, so it was all kinds of new endeavors happening for us.
Sure.
Which were a lot of fun.
Now that you're not doing them.
Yes, now that they're over.
I remember that very much with when my wife and I got together. She's 3 years older than me, so she was a little bit more established in her career. I was early on. I had stopped competing as a bodybuilder and now started into this counseling world, but I was still pretty, first couple of years into it. Well, when we got married, 2 years after we got married, a year and a half or so after we got married, Caleb was born.
Okay.
And made the decision for her to stay at home, which prior to that, she never thought she'd be doing that. But she made 60% of her income. And so, and I was working in the schools at the time, and I was coaching football in the afternoon, and it was a scramble there for a bit until I was able to get picked up and do some part-time clinical practice. So I worked during the day at the school, coach in the afternoon, and then work at night. But you do what you have to do,
Yes. Yeah. Well, and that's what we walked away from a similar situation. Amrock paid very well.
Yeah.
We were making good money.
Yeah.
And for a couple of young kids to make that decision that we did doesn't happen very often because I took a significant pay cut to go into construction. She took a pay elimination. And, so it was a very tough decision for us at the time. But again, when you think about the game of chess, we were trying to be very strategic on how we were moving forward. And that's how we came to that ultimate decision.
Well, and how many years do you think after you guys made that decision for her to go back to school and for you to go into the trades did Amrock close?
I want to say it was about 4.
Yeah, so
4 years
I didn't think it was, because I'm thinking this is Jayla, is your oldest, right?
Yep.
And I'm thinking it can't be that much longer after that Amrock was.
It was maybe 3-4 years, and again, having that perspective, we're looking at it, we're like, wow, okay, it did close because nobody really thought Amrock was going to close in Rockford. You just didn't think it was going to happen. You hear the rumors, you hear the gossip, I guess, but you'd never think something like that big is going to close, and it did. So looking back on it, it was definitely a blessing in disguise that we took that route we did.
And I think those are, we can look back and know that was definitely the right move, but like you said, making those moves do not come easy. You get tempted with better than average good money, especially for the ages that you guys were at, if you're both working there. It's what happens with some people that are working in some of the factories right out of high school around here, Chrysler or wherever it may be. And even though it may not be really what they want to do, it's hard to turn away that money, and especially if you start the whole big boy toys and homes and things like that. Now you're locked in, and your choices become harder to make a move. And so
definitely.
So you get in construction, and first it starts off with painting.
Yeah.
And so you're in the trades, and obviously some of it is just you're just bootstrapping. You're just and
learning a lot.
Yeah. and do you think, going back again, you talked about you had a coach / mentor for the chess program, which obviously was a huge part of that. His name?
Mr. Boyer.
Mr. Boyer. Okay.
Yeah.
And so that
he's a physics teacher at Auburn.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. He's going to be teaching about strategy as well when it comes to chess. And so then there was mentors and sages within the union too that you were working with, and obviously there were some people that spoke into you then.
Yeah.
So any particular highlights of that?
Well, I look back, and there's a lot of people that I just happened to cross paths with at the right time, and I do got to go back. And Mr. Boyer was phenomenal. Somebody I'll never forget. Ironically, never got to hear from or see after graduation.
Okay.
So I'm not even sure what he's up to now. But there's some other just phenomenal teachers I had at Auburn.
Okay.
That I just talked to one the other day.
Oh, okay.
And it's just amazing how that happens, and I still draw on some of those experiences from still today, from back then, and it really does bring a smile to my face when those memories come across, and how that happens. But when I got into construction, I had an uncle in the trade, and he literally was, I would say, the poster child for construction worker. He was outspoken. He was really good at what he did, and he was going to tell you about it. One way or the other, you were never doing enough, you had never learned enough, and you had never given enough. And so that's what I got to go to work with every day.
Okay.
And that was just a huge blessing for me as I got introduced into a profession that is clamoring for people that are good, honest, reputable, a lot of the things that we look for, and that's really what helped mold me. Then along the way, once I got introduced, there were some, we call them old timers, journeymen, and they took me under their wing and started teaching me different parts of the trade. And so I learned how to hang, a lot of expensive wall coverings. I learned how to finish woodwork. I learned how to paint. They call it faux, which means fake woodwork. I learned how to paint fake marble. I learned how to do a lot of things in the industry that many of my peers don't get exposed to. And I saw it very early on. I was very fortunate because the owner of the company at the time had also took me under his wing. And so the owner of the company made it a point to expose me to all the different aspects of the trade, from high-end or fine residential to very intricate industrial work that requires knowledge of chemicals and different paints and what you can mix and can't mix, all the way to basic restoration work. There were just so many parts to the trade that I got exposed to that would have been overwhelming, but at the time I went right back to my chess strategy and said, wow, I didn't even know that this was part of the game. And once I got introduced to it, I learned about every single aspect of it, just like you would every single piece on a chessboard. You want to know what their capabilities are and what they can and can't do. And so that's how I approached the trade, and became what they call a true journeyman, a journeyman that is not one-dimensional. And that's the gist of it for the first, I would say, 3-4 years. And I started running large commercial and industrial projects about a year and a half in.
Oh, really? Okay.
So now, as an apprentice still, because I haven't graduated the apprenticeship program yet.
How long does that take?
3 years.
3 years.
And so you go to school every 2 weeks.
Okay.
Miss a day of pay, so the school is on your own, but the school is paid for, which was great, because I left with no school debt, no student loans or anything like that. And a year and a half in, now I'm running crews of men, and some of them were okay with it, some of them weren't, but I also had the respect pretty early on because of being able to do so many different facets of the trade that it helped carry me through.
And approximately how old are you at this time?
At this time, I'm about 20 years old.
Really? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So I can just imagine. But again, part of it, I'm assuming, part of it was the combination of not only putting some time in, even though it hadn't been a lot of time yet, putting some of that time in, but being ambitious, being studious about it. And then maybe a little bit of your uncle wearing off on you.
Oh, most definitely, yeah.
And how to be able to speak about it, because in any case, right? This was coaching sports. You can't be asking; you have to be telling them what you're doing, what they're going to do next.
You don't want to do a public opinion poll because those opinions will come in.
Exactly. So fast forward us a little bit in the life of the business. So you spent a lot of time working for other individuals, and at some point you made the leap to opening up your own business. Is that
no? So what had happened is about 5 years into it. So unions, they have a leader called business rep.
Okay.
And so those are the guys that help find work for everybody in the local.
Okay. And
at that point, our business rep was leaving, and there was an open seat. Usually it's an elected position, but there's an open seat, and I got asked by some other elders in the local to consider going for this position. And so now I'm around 24.
Okay.
Been in the trade 5-6 years going on, 5 years at that point. And I'd started attending union meetings, getting involved at the local level. Because I really didn't know what a union was at that point. I was very young and just worried about going to work every day. So I didn't quite understand it, and I started attending meetings. And I think by the time I was 21, I became elected treasurer of the local. Okay. And so now I'm handling the finances of the local and overseeing that. Okay. So yeah, there's a few other things in there, and so I was doing that. I actually had to take a step back from the treasurer position when my son was born, and he was born in 2003. Okay. So I had done the treasurer position from 2001 to 2003, I want to say. Don't quote me on the hard dates, but somewhere around that. It was maybe 2 years. And my son didn't have colic, but he sure had something close to it. Okay. And so we weren't sleeping. Nobody's sleeping at the house. And now it's all hands on deck at the house. We've got to resolve what's going on there and keep the wife, able to be sane. And really, it was all hands on deck.
Because this is a second baby.
This is our second one.
Yeah.
And so now we're doing that. And I took a step back from the union role. And I'll fast forward back to the 2004, an opening pops up. Okay. I was approached by some of the elders of the local to consider going for this position. And I was kind of at a crossroads, because I was to the point of either purchasing a business, opening a business, or I didn't know what it was. I felt like I'd accomplished a lot in a short amount of time, and I was looking to see what the next road was going to be. And ultimately, I decided to get involved on the union side of things and became the business rep for our local now. Okay. And so I've been doing that for about the last 15 years. Okay. And it has been a whole separate game of chess. Okay. that handles administrative duties. I'm still the treasurer of the local because I'm able to do both. And the job description is long and lengthy. I deal with politics, I deal with negotiations, I deal with separate agreements with different companies here in the state line area. Been negotiating for about 15 years on what I call a professional level, because one of the big parts of this job is bringing our small business owners and our members to an agreement on health insurance, retirement, wages, and so on. So we want to make sure that we keep the harmony there as well. And we've got a pretty good success rate of doing that for the last 15 years.
Okay, good. So that's where I think when we first met and you were talking about, you spoke as if you were running a business.
It is.
And you are. I never happened to ask what the name of it was. I didn't know it was the local. So, okay, all right, so that makes sense.
Kind of to fast forward, our pension is funded at 128%. Our health insurance fund is, I think, got 2 years in reserves. So there's a lot of different things that have to be handled, and it's a full-fledged business. I mean, it's $1 million business on top of it, so there's a lot of things that you've got to keep track of.
So learning those types of things, obviously you were, again, young and not having had a lot of maybe experience with those things, but then you learn about the importance of making sure that the pension's funded, that's self-funded, that it's not upside down, which we've heard horror stories about those types of things. And with other unions, right? And then with the health insurance and the fact that that's already have reserves for that, so if for some reason something happens and there's less members, that it won't put individuals in jeopardy, right?
Now, and I'm just a piece to that whole puzzle as well. We have a fund administrator that does a phenomenal job for us, and so I want to make sure that comes off the right way. Our fund administrator does a great job, and he's the one that's been able to handle that and set those on the right track. But there's a lot of parts that are played around that.
Sure. Okay. But it's having that awareness and that understanding of wanting to make sure that you keep those things balanced that way, where someone who may not be exposed to those things, they wouldn't be aware of that.
Well, and even our local account, just our checks and balances that got to come out of that.
Okay. So let's kind of then move to so Jayla's now in grade school.
Yes.
And so she's being exposed, because maybe you and Esmeralda are in a little bit different place than you guys were growing up. Did Esmeralda play sports growing up?
Mildly. Now she'll tell you she was a superstar, but it was mild at Auburn. She played, I think, until sophomore year. At Auburn.
All right. Okay. Okay. And so Jayla is exposed to basketball and organized basketball at an early level.
Yes.
But there were some limitations to it of the organized opportunities that they had. So tell us a little bit about because I know for me, having been in sports my entire life, primarily football and wrestling, there was a lot of times that when programs first getting developed, it's volunteers, and those volunteers tend to be parents who may not know a ton about sports. I
was one of them.
And that doesn't always make it bad, but sometimes it makes it difficult, right? Especially if they're not necessarily doing the due diligence of learning the game and really learning the intricacies of it. But it sounds like you took that on because you wanted to really understand the game more so than just like a pickup game down at the Y. So tell us a little bit about that.
So my daughter, she's at Rockford Christian, and exactly the way you laid it out, right? Where they're having tryouts, and next thing you know, they need some parent volunteers. And I've always loved the game. I really have always loved the game. And so when I got that opportunity to become a parent volunteer, I couldn't get my hand up fast enough. I'm like, yes, let's do this. This sounds like fun. It did sound like fun until we got started. And I still joke about some of the parents from that team. And my daughter was blessed to have a core of 5 kids that stuck it out all the way through varsity at Rockford Christian. And so I got to know, and I'm still friends with the parents, some of the parents to this day, but I got to know the parents and the players really well. Had a lot of fun with it. But when my journey started, I had no idea what I was doing. I couldn't tell you a play. I didn't know an offense. I didn't even know how to run a practice. I just knew that I wanted to be a parent volunteer.
Sure.
And so that's when I started doing some reading, started looking stuff up on YouTube. And the amount of stuff on YouTube now, even compared to, 15, 16 years ago, however long it's been, it blows it away.
Sure,
I mean, it's day and night comparison. So I get in and embark on this new journey. Got another parent that's helping, and we're still friends to this day. Our daughters being the same age, and that was how school basketball started. And I kind of progressed up every grade level through Rockford Christian, and there was a couple coaches. There was a couple seasons or years in between where they had a coach, and so I wasn't needed. But fast forward through the actual school ball process, from sophomore year through senior year, I was a varsity coach, and so that was a lot of fun as well. But a lot had changed in that first 5, 6, 7 years.
Sure.
A lot of education happened.
Now, when Jayla was had played varsity in high school. Now you weren't the head coach. Were you the head coach?
No, I was an assistant.
One of the assistants. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, who was the head coach at that time?
Mike McCullen.
Oh yeah, yes.
And so I believe he still coaches baseball over there.
Okay.
And he was brought in, and Mike had come up to me when he was going to take the job, and at that point I'd been coaching AAU for quite a few years. There's a lot of really cool things going on, and Mike had essentially came up and said, John, it's either we're going to coach this, or we got to figure out what we're going to do here. And so I kind of jumped on board with Mike, and I'd known him for a couple years, and he's always been heavily involved in basketball, baseball, etc. And so me and him clicked from day one. We'd always gotten along really well.
Well, I know, and he's had some phenomenal success. Not only helped out with the basketball program and really tried to move that, to another level, but of course with baseball at Rockford Christian, when he had some very talented kids in the last few years and stuff. One of the things I remember when I first started coaching at Harlem, it was in '94, and that was the first time that I was exposed when I played football. And when we were wrestling, there was a very small group of athletes, high school athletes, that would go to a camp, right? And you'd go for a week, or if it was wrestling, you'd go to a 2-week Iowa wrestling camp or whatever it was. But there was a very small percentage of the individuals that I played with, at least, and in the Nick 10, that went off to camp. And I remember going down to NIU when I went to a football camp 2 years in a row, and it was a different level of exposure, to be able to go down there. And I was younger, so there was kids that were older than me. It was a high school camp, so I was a freshman going into my freshman year, going into my sophomore, I think it was, or maybe it was sophomore going into my junior year. But it was a lot of different exposure. Nowadays, when I went and started coaching in the '90s, 7-on-7s, this was normal. There was summer baseball leagues, there was summer, basketball camp all the time, and now it seems like it's just part of it, and now there's individuals that are involved with, outside of school sports that may be getting looked at and picked up and have opportunity to play at that next level, and what they do actually in their high school may or may not. I mean, obviously, with some sports like football, it's different. But like basketball and
even golf, tennis, a lot of things have evolved.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how that with Rockford Heat and how that all came about, and everything that's happened with that.
Yeah. So in 5th grade, we're coaching, and I start hearing about travel basketball. Now, I had no idea that there was anything like that for girls. I know when I was in high school, there was one program that I knew of that had ran guys, and they would take them around the Midwest, in some cases the country, that I was familiar with, called Primetime. And so Jayla's in 5th grade, and I'm hearing about travel basketball for girls. Well, I knew nothing about nothing, and ended up saying, okay, well, maybe I can pull some of these kids together and keep them playing. We'll get them better for next year, was the thought behind it. Very, very simple thought behind it. And that was it. So I pulled a group of kids together, mostly Rockford Christian kids, and then there was other kids in the conference, so some from Roscoe, some from Stephen Mack, and I can't remember all the schools now, but I remember the girls. I just can't remember what grade schools they were in. And I pulled this group together and said, okay, we're going to practice a couple times a week and find some tournaments, which I had no idea what I was doing. I had a best friend that was helping me out, and me and him, we essentially counseled each other for probably the next 6 months of trying to figure out how to coach, trying to figure out how to run a team. And then I had a third buddy who introduced me on where to find tournaments and how to start the actual travel process and join AAU and what that meant and what was behind it. And so we hit the ground rolling. 5th grade, our first tournament, I will never forget it. Up in Milwaukee, lost every game by 50 or 60. I mean, we got plastered. We were done. I think the kids were crying. I was crying. My wife was crying. Everybody's crying. But that was a turning point that I've never forgotten to this day. And I remember our first practice back, and I had a talk with the girls, and I said that was my fault. I didn't have you prepared. Essentially, I didn't know what to prepare them for, but that changed me at that moment, and things got real. They got real intense, real tough, and real challenging. And we had a lot of players come and go. We had a core that stuck it out as a first team of Rockford Heat. By the time we got to 7th grade, the end of 7th grade, we started winning. I don't think we won a game for 2 years. I mean, I don't know if the sincerity of that comment comes through well enough. We didn't win a game for 2 years.
It's a long time.
You know, when you go back to chess and you go back to construction and you go back to how you gain perspective, it's always pulling from your past challenges and your past successes. And at that moment, 2 years in, I got no successes to pull from. And all I've got is a whole lot of challenges. And we kind of had that moment in 7th grade. I'm like, man, I don't know if I'm even doing this right. And I didn't. I wasn't sure. And I knew I had a lot of hardworking kids. I knew that I had this group that, wow, I think about it to this day, they'd probably run through a wall for me. And that spoke volumes because it made me want to be better. And so we kept plugging away. And then a weird thing happened. We started winning. It's weird. Nothing that any of us were used to. And I kept telling the girls, hey, you got to learn how to lose before we can learn how to win. Yeah. And that group, they just kept plugging away. And by 8th grade, we qualified for AAU Nationals down in Florida.
Oh, wow.
We pulled together some resources, went down there. I think we took 12th in the country. Played against some players that are now in the WNBA.
Okay.
We played against players that have had phenomenal college careers. And so it's great for all of them looking back, but now we're still in this journey, and I'm going to kind of go back to the Rockford Heat journey a little bit. So we get to this 8th grade marker for Jayla's team, and they're getting letters in the mail from college coaches. Even I was a little shocked. I'm like, wait, what? So now I had to change what we were doing. Before, we just started out to get better. Now there's this different element that's coming along, and we're getting letters from coaches, and I had to learn that side of it and what that meant, and found out that these girls could get to college through basketball and get a significant amount of it paid for, if not all of it. And so I changed the focus, and we started going to tournaments that were geared just for college exposure.
Okay.
We ultimately, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people would agree, we changed girls basketball in this area.
Okay.
And it happened.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about what do you mean by that comment?
So girls basketball became a lot of talk started happening locally, and girls basketball now was kids going to college or possibly going to college. We started adding teams. People were just calling me up and saying, hey, we're hearing, that you guys got this model of getting college exposure. We want to be part of it. And so we started adding teams as they rolled into freshman year. We added a sophomore team. We added another 8th grade, 7th grade. It was just a snowball effect that I didn't see coming. And I never set out for it to be that way because, again, we started out just to get better.
Right.
And then it turned into, wow, we could potentially get these kids to college. And then it turned into adding teams. And then the next step was our first graduating class, the 2014 class, which wasn't my daughter's class. So we had added this team, and every one of those kids went on scholarship.
Really? Okay.
I couldn't believe it. And so, as you're building these networks of college coaches, those networks are real. And I saved them. And now the class of 2015, which is my daughter's class, and a core of kids that had stuck it out. I mean, they grinded it out for years. They probably hated me for it. I think they love me for it now, but at that moment, there was probably some serious hatred because I was very direct and I was very vocal about what we were trying to accomplish. And when it had changed from just trying to get better to get to college, there was no more hugs given out. There was no more, hey, it'll be okay. It changed to, this is how we've got to do it, and this is how we're going to get there. And this is what our goal is. And so we essentially came up with a mission statement, a goal, and everything got real serious at that moment. And so out of that 15 class, 8 out of the 10 girls in that class ended up going D1 or D2.
Okay. And this is out of the 2015 class?
That was Jayla's class.
Jayla's class, okay.
Yeah, and so between NCAA or NAIA, and it was a huge accomplishment for all those girls, and something I'm very proud of all of them for, because I know what they put into it. And when I say that girls basketball changed, they were a big part of that. And it didn't change in the year 2015. It changed when the majority of those kids were starting varsity players as freshmen. Everybody had to take note and say, whoa, what is going on here? How did this happen? Right. And that's when things started changing. So it was around 2010, 2011 that you saw that dynamic. Before we started having 1 or 2 girls maybe go on and play college ball because they really stood out. Now we're averaging double digits every year.
So, and for some people, and I know not not currently, parents, but like individuals like, growing up in my age group, you would think of like your high school sports were your platform to get college exposure. And obviously in football, that's a big part of it, unless you're going off to camps or doing other types of things. Now with the internet, a lot of different there's a lot of variables. But what I'm hearing you say is that one of the things that may have really impacted girls basketball in the northern Illinois area were travel teams, the Rockford Heat and the travel teams, because now they're getting exposed to platforms that they wouldn't have gotten exposed if they were playing locally, or even in these larger regional tournaments that they would get exposed to a couple times a year. And now the opportunities to play at that next level have just got expanded, and it's not reliant on a school program. And that's not to take away from the school programs, but it's not all your eggs in one basket.
That's a really good way to break it down, and I always want to emphasize that this isn't a replacement to high school sports either, because I've been a high school coach, so I have a lot of value for high school sports in general. I have a lot of value in what comes out of high school sports, and I have a lot of value of competing to win. So to me, it doesn't matter if it's high school, AAU, travel. I understand the value of those things with all these different levels. However, it does change when you talk about a program with like Rockford Heat, and the change is simple. We only want to complement a high school program. We only want to complement those athletes and be able to hopefully give them those extra opportunities of college exposure, because you can't take a high school team to these events. That are loaded with Division I and Division II and so on, coaches on the sidelines. So it's not even an option for the high school teams. And there's been a lot of chatter over the years of, well, AAU coaches don't respect high school sports don't respect AAU sports. But the reality of it is we're all in this together, and I, of all people, know it better because I've been a high school coach, and I understand the importance of each one of those roles. So I feel I have a lot of good relationships with high school coaches here in the state line. There's always new coaches, so maybe some of the newer ones I don't know as well, but for the coaches that have been around, I've worked well with, and been able to make sure that I even connect them with those college coaches as well, saying, hey, you've got this player that is getting this attention from these coaches. Just want to give you a heads up, they may be calling you to get more insight about that athlete from you.
Earlier when you were talking about, and I think it is important, just finishing off that note, I think it is important that it's just like anything. The ultimate goal, right, when working with these the female athlete or athletes in general, the ultimate goal is for them to go as far as they want to go, right?
Exactly.
And what opportunities are there, and for them not to ceiling themselves. So it needs to be a collaborative effort with the school sports, which being a football coach or a high school coach and lower level coach, there's something about playing for your school that you attend that can't be replaced by anything else.
Exactly.
Because then your friends get to see you play. You're representing where the hallways that you're walking in, and that's huge in itself. But a lot of times we're not going to get better unless we do more than the 3 months. And you said something a little bit ago that reminded me. I was listening to a podcast yesterday. Joe Rogan had one of his friends on, and somehow the conversation evolved to combat sports. Mostly talking about MMA and boxing, and he talked about that. Rogan was saying, as someone who is a promoter of the MMA, he speaks very unapologetically, very direct, that if a person who's continued to compete but doesn't have that fire anymore, he's like, you need to get out, because you're gonna cause brain damage, you're gonna get injured, and because there's too many individuals out there who are putting 100% into it, that do have that fire, and then are not just punching a clock. And you said something about when it shifted from wanting just to get better to wanting to go to that or preparing them to go to that next level, so they at least have the option.
Yeah.
And what it sounded like to me is you were talking about that drive, talking about not making excuses, but pushing yourself, learning from what isn't working, that you may be making a mistake in, or a blind spot you may have, and not wishing it away, but actually attacking it. And I think that is so critical that we speak into individuals about that yes, this is going to be what it takes to do the difference. And if you're not doing it, and obviously we're not talking about, Rogan was talking about combat sports, so there's a real risk that's online.
Yep.
If I know that you just want to be part of the team, I need to know that. Then you need to still be doing 100%, but then don't be upset if you're the 1 out of the 10 that's not getting looked at.
Yes. No, you laid that out very well, and that was the distinction. Because when I looked at what I was doing this for, and what I started Rockford Heat for, I think it's healthy to be able to evolve as well, and whether that's individually or as a program. And when we got to that crossroads of change, it was a shift, right, that we talk about. When we got to that point, it was tough, because I also knew at that moment not all the girls were in it for that. And so that was a tough shift for me to make, because I knew that there was going to be change. And whenever you have change, that it brings a whole set of new challenges, a whole set of new experiences that you're going to have to get through for that next level, for that next opportunity. And at that moment, that next level, that next opportunity was, we were shifting to make sure that we could help these kids get to college. And one of the reasons for that was, there's an opportunities for kids to go get better. Not having gone to college myself, having sent, a young mom to college, I know the importance of education. And so when I saw that, that was that next change that I said, this is it. We've got to do it. Because, for women especially, I'll just say it, I think college is even more critical for them, because I think in this day and age, guys can still go get a job somewhere and do okay. But I think it's critical for those opportunities to be there for women. And, having a daughter standing there looking at me, that at that moment, that was the driving force behind that change. And so when I made the shift, I went all in. And I talked about building these connections with college coaches and saving them. Well, what I did is I went in overdrive on those college connections and started expanding my own network. A lot of phone calls, a lot of emails, and then social media gets introduced into the mix. So now you've got a different way of connecting with people and understanding how social media can work in a very positive way. And using that tool, I literally expanded our network from coast to coast. And that's one of the reasons why, fast forwarding from that switch, in the last 7 years, we got 85 girls playing college on college basketball on scholarship. They've been from Hawaii to North Carolina, from Florida to Minnesota. I haven't gotten any in Canada yet, but I'm waiting for that. And so that has been the fruit of that labor, watching all these opportunities happen. And in that 7 years, we're talking about just under $6 million in free college education. So it's been to put it in a word term, there probably isn't the right one out there, but it's been life-changing.
Sure. Yeah.
For a lot of these kids. A lot of these kids have been inner-city kids, very similar to my background, my wife's background. Some of these kids are from rural communities around the state line. Some of these kids are from perfectly fine households. But one thing that sports has always done is it's knocked down those social barriers to say, well, I don't care what you are, we're teammates.
Yep.
And so, having so many kids from so many different backgrounds come together has been very humbling for me to be able to watch. And when I say myself, I also need to mention that this wouldn't be possible without a lot of other extraordinary adults.
Sure. Oh yeah, definitely.
That filled the role as coach, that filled the role as trainer, that filled the role as mentor, that filled the role as a parent. And so I don't want this to ever come off as John Penney did this, because I'm very quick to point out that Rockford Heat is only a success due to a lot of extraordinary adults that put their time in and said, I'm willing to help, including parents. I mean, that when you're traveling around the country going to these tournaments, there's a lot of parents that have stepped up. And I'll just lead into the other facet to this. I have fundraised, to sponsor a lot of kids. And so this also goes back to a lot of individuals, a lot of companies, a lot of different organizations that have stepped up and said, I will help you get that kid there, get that kid to the finish line. So again, it's not me. It really is a lot of extraordinary people that have gotten involved.
Well, I think with any type of organization, it does come from an original story, some original starting point, and then it shifts from that and maybe goes into a vision of where we want it to be.
Yeah.
And some of it has to be those, when we have these major setbacks, when you experience, showing up at that Milwaukee tournament and recognizing that maybe we underestimated what we're walking into, right? And recognizing that part of it is that they were, a lot of those other teams were going there with what now is the vision of Rockford Heat.
Yep.
Back then,
yep.
and you guys didn't know that. You didn't get that part of the invitation. And I think that setback ended up being a critical thing. The fact that as you said early on today, that you didn't have the resources to play high school sports and didn't have that type of guidance or support bringing you through that. That's a foundational piece of what you want Rockford Heat to be. And then most importantly, and we talk about this all the time, it isn't necessarily, where you went to school to play or what title you won or championship you got into, but the things that you learned to get there are so critical, because we change that over, we transfer that over into real life, because it is life. What we learn playing chess, what we learn in practice around the court, can then be translated to these other areas. And I know you talked about, you just alluded to the foundation that you guys have and fundraising for that, so that there is a built-in process of being able to help individuals who want to work hard and want to put everything into it, that finances are not a barrier to that.
Yeah, so let me just speak on that. So remember I said I just got into this to help some kids out to get better at basketball. Well, then we got to about 15, 16 teams, or some cases I think we had 21 teams one summer. Well, then I had to manage a significant amount of money. So Rockford Heat was started as a business quite a few years ago, due to the government regulations and stuff like that. They regulate how much money is coming in and out of an account, and you've got to file taxes on it and so on and so forth. So I had to bring the business side into this to even be able to get to the coaching part after a couple years. And it was something I never envisioned. And then fast forward a little further, and we start helping a significant amount of kids, and donations are coming in. So then I had to start up a 501c3. And so there's Rockford Heat basketball, and then there's Rockford Heat Foundation.
Sure.
And so now you're essentially running a couple different organizations, just so you can help some kids, play basketball and get better.
Yeah.
So it really took and shifted again. Turned to that. Okay, I now I've got to do the financial planning, I've got to do the bookkeeping, I've got to do the accounts payables, receivables, and manage that whole facet of it. So there's been a lot of interesting things that have organically come out of this, and it's been okay. We've managed it. It's just been a continuously changing, I would say, endeavor that has been nothing but positive for me personally. And I, with all these changes, though, I still have to go back and tell you, there's just been some amazing adults along the way. My wife, bearing with me through one of them has been another blessing that, just continues to pull us closer. And
And I think last time we got together, you told me that Jayla is just graduating, right?
Yeah.
Or is graduating December.
Just graduated college.
She just graduated or going to graduate?
No, she just graduated.
Just graduated, okay.
She just started graduate school.
Graduate school, that's what it was.
So she's done with her bachelor's in psychology.
Okay.
And now she is doing her grad school at Drake in Des Moines. So.
Okay, all right. And that's also in mental health?
Yes.
To get her mental health,
okay. She just got her first job as a counselor, loving it, really, really excited about it. And actually, can I back up just a second and talk about when she graduated high school in 2015?
Sure.
I hit another crossroads at that point of what was I going to do with Rockford Heat? Was I going to keep it going? There was a lot of talk locally, that Rockford Heat was going to be done. John Penney was in it for his daughter. Now that she's graduated, what's going to happen? And that was a conversation had between me and my wife. Mm-hmm. And, both of our very, very humble backgrounds, it was very easy for us to come to the conclusion that I was going to keep going with it. And that was 2015 was the second graduating class of high school kids. And now as we are, I'm going to a signing today, as a matter of fact, for a basketball player. And now for the 2020 class, that's doing their signings now, or I've still got some unsigned seniors we're working with. It has just been... It has always been something that me and my wife have said, no, we've got to keep this going.
Sure.
And I will go back to the only way I'm able to make it happen is just some great coaches that have stepped up, volunteers that have stepped up, and adults, because a lot of people just assume that the business side of it is to make money. Well, the business side of it is definitely not to make money for Rockford Heat, and that's not what comes out of it. But what comes out of it are these stories that we're talking about, and they continue to happen. A lot of these kids, first generation college. Not just college athlete, but actual college participants and college students and their families. And it's amazing because that gets lost even in this day and age. We just assume that everybody has gone to college. People assume I've gone to college, and that's just not the case. And we still are cranking out every year first-time college students and and college student athletes that are going to go on and change their family lineage.
Yeah. Well, and I can just imagine that if you've been able to continue keeping that work ethic in the practices and the expectation of the work ethic, that when these college coaches that you're contacting and reaching out to, they know it has less to do with how many wins or how many points or how many rebounds or how much they know what type of player they're getting, because they know that they've continued to work through a system that emphasizes those things. John, I know that we've touched on a lot of different things today, and I would love to have you back on, because I know there's more for us to talk about.
No problem.
Because there's some other things I know you have going on that you want to bring to the Rockford area and the Rockford community. In some ways, when we get into this topic, if you're willing to come on again, I'll be like, why do you want to do this?
Okay.
And then you'll be able to share that vision too, because it's like jumping into that end of it'll be the deep end once again. But I would love to have you back on in a few weeks, and that we could do part 2 of this conversation. Okay. But if you were going to right at the moment, right? I know in a week or so they're going to start having tryouts for girls basketball and guys basketball.
Girls is today.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Yep.
And so if you were going to share anything with those girls that you participated with, those athletes, and now as they go to tryouts for their high school sports team or their middle school sports team, what would you want to share with those and share with those parents?
Yeah, so I do always share with the athletes before they head to their high school tryouts, and it's very simple. Personify what it means to be a Rockford Heat player. Bring the intensity in defense. Bring the leadership on the offensive side. Bring the leadership that oozes out of these kids, not because they're natural born leaders, but because of the work ethic they have, because of the drive they have. The skill is something that's a byproduct of all these other intangibles. And when somebody really just, I guess, shows those intangibles, it sticks out. Mm-hmm. And that's what leadership is all about. Mm-hmm. And so I really try to get them to understand that as a high school kid, that can be tough because there's so many social issues that they're dealing with every day that really can affect how they even feel in the morning. And I'm asking them now to put those social barriers aside and walk in there like you are the Rockford Heat player, you're the star of the city, you're the star of the team, and act like it. Mm-hmm. Carry yourself like it, and really just do it.
Nice. Well, thank you very much for being here. I thoroughly enjoyed hearing about how chess played a part in your life, how that laid out, and how it not only in your vocation and your career that way, but then also what you brought to the Rockford area with the Rockford Heat. So,
thank you,
John. Thank you.
All right.
If there is any way, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you through the Rockford Heat? What's the best?
Yeah. So if you go to the website, just rockfordheat.com, I have all my contact info. Rockford Heat has a Facebook page. You can send me messages through that. Okay. If you Google my name, you'll find my phone numbers and all contact info pretty easily. It's definitely out there. But rockfordheat.com or Rockford Heat on Facebook.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. As we have shared numerous times, how sport as well as art imitates life, and as John pointed out today, how we can learn lessons. Setbacks are a crucial part of us becoming the people that we were intended to be. So again, thank you for being with us today. I look forward to being with you again next week.